I never heard, and I was expecting whole eggs, or I was expecting to hear olive oil or debatably coconut oil which is high in saturated fat, but from a plant source versus an animal source, being the saturated fats like in a red steak or something. So maybe you can touch a bit more on those in particular.
Here's the issue that makes this really complicated is it probably depends on the specific fatty acid. And so just saying, polyunsaturated fats, you can probably find a polyunsaturated fat that isn't good for you. But on the whole, polyunsaturated fats appear to be pretty good for you.
I think that, sorry to interrupt, but I just think that when you say polyunsaturated fat, I don't think people are thinking, okay, what food is that? They're just thinking that's just a fat. Like if you say no one's known, like 5% of the people who are watching are knowing what you're talking about. So I just wanted let's just dumb it down for the morons of the world. We don't know what's going polyunsaturated. What is that? Is that EPA, DHA? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, so polyunsaturated fats, including like the omega-3s, omega-6s, omega-9s. So when we say polyunsaturated, it's something that has more than one unsaturated bond in the fatty acid chain. Now, things like nuts are high in polyunsaturated fats. And then those are kind of your top tiers we talked about. Monounsaturated fats appear to have a slight protective effect on heart disease, not as much as polyunsaturated fats. But again, it probably depends on the specific fat. Now, like say olive oil, which is something that we didn't bring up previously, that particularly appears that it, as a monounsaturated fat, may be pretty good for you. There's quite a bit of evidence, especially with the studies of the Mediterranean diet, demonstrating that olive oil may have some health benefits as it pertains to cardiovascular disease and those sorts of things. But a lot of people bring up eggs, and I think I'm a big fan of eggs. I think eggs are super high quality protein source, probably the highest quality protein source you can get other than whey protein. I like the taste. You can cook with them in a lot of things. But the fat source in particular in eggs is mostly saturated fat. Now, egg yolks have other beneficial nutrients in them, but I'm not somebody who's going to say, hey, you should probably have 6 eggs a day or something like that. I don't think that that's the best advice. One, because it's a lot of calories extra if you're somebody who's worried about body composition. And two, it is a lot of saturated fat. Now, you could say, well, they have all these other nutrients in them. For sure. But if you had 1 or 2 yolks, you're getting enough of those nutrients. You don't need to slam down tons of whole eggs. Now, when it comes to sources of saturated fat, if you make me pick, which are better, whole eggs are up there. But again, I just don't think it's something where you need to be slamming down, 6 to 12 whole eggs per day. I'll tell people what I do. Usually I'll have 1 or 2 whole eggs with egg whites with my breakfast, and that's it. But if I feel like having bacon one day, I may omit the whole egg, because you're operating on a budget. So again, egg yolks, perfectly fine. And Greg, it's so funny. If I cook a breakfast and I show it and it's egg whites, people get so offended about me not having the whole egg. Well, what's wrong with the whole egg? I'm not saying anything's wrong with the whole egg. I'm just saying that, hey, notice how I have bacon at this breakfast? I'm doing a substitution right here. I'm saying, you know what? This breakfast is for my taste buds, and I felt like having bacon. But yes, I think whole eggs have some benefits, but I don't think those benefits are because of the fat source.
And as far as whole eggs go, I should clarify for people, I'm not against people having whole eggs. However, I recommend people trying to lose weight, they substitute at least some of the whole eggs for egg white just because they have so much less calories. And saturated fat wise, I'm not a big fan of it, but I'm not saying you can't have any. But personally, I wouldn't have over, say, 5% of the calories of your diet from saturated, if possible. That's just my personal. I'm not saying you can't. We have olive oil. What do you think is the best oil? Canola? Could that top olive oil? Or what about coconut oil? Because I just want to touch on coconut oil because 10 years ago, I'm adding coconut oil. I'm taking out this fat and I'm cooking with coconut oil. I'm going to lose weight. And it's like, well, it's calories in, calories out. But is coconut oil like a magic anabolic oil that you just need to add to your diets?
I quite frankly never understood the hype behind coconut oil, to be honest. I mean, it's saturated fat. I don't think it tastes better. I actually am not a fan of coconut at all, to be honest. But I understand some people like the taste. Okay. If you're, using a coconut oil spray versus a canola oil spray, I think canola oil is perfectly fine. You got like this whole group of people now who are like, seed oils are the cause of obesity and every disease known to man. I can use, and they put these scientific references together, I can hack together a mechanism to support anything if I want to. What matters are human randomized control trials. And the human randomized control trials show that if you substitute saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats, there is a reduction in the risk of heart disease. So I like to operate based on facts and not feelings. So if you tell me, hey, I like coconut oil spray, okay, well, we're talking about a few grams of fat, right? Okay, well, if you like the coconut oil spray, by all means, use the coconut oil spray. I'm not going to make a big deal about that. But if you're cooking with actual oil, right, that's a lot of saturated fat to be getting in as added oils. And I think people really need to be careful with added oils, especially saturated fat. And I actually had do you know Ethan Suplee, Greg?
Yes, he's that famous guy, lost a lot of weight.
Yeah.
He was cycling, I think, 8 hours a day for months. Yeah.
Yeah, so he actually, I was on his podcast, he was on mine, and one of the things he mentioned was, he's like, I've tried every different diet out there that you could possibly imagine. And, I lost a lot of weight doing keto. He said, but I plateaued hard on keto because I was thinking I just needed to get the carbs, like the carbs were making me fat. So I would start omitting vegetables and lettuce, and I would just dump more oil on stuff, or I would eat like chicken thighs, that sort of thing. And, looking back, I realized that I was just eating so much oil and fats that I was no longer able to create an energy deficit. So, I use spray because it's just easier to get the amount you need for like the cooking and the flavor while not overdoing it, understanding that if you sit there with the spray thing on for, 2 minutes, just because it says 0 calories it's not actually 0 calories. It's just in one quick spray, there's essentially 0 calories. But again, if you're coating an entire pan, you're getting a few grams of fat off that. But again, if we're talking about that a couple times a day, if someone wants to use coconut oil, I'm not going to throw a fit about it, right? Like, go ahead and do that. But if you're using coconut oil as like the primary source of your fats, I don't think that's a good idea. There's studies showing it'll raise your LDL cholesterol. LDL cholesterol, regardless of what some dissenters will say, is an independent risk factor for heart disease. I mean, we have every level of evidence showing that LDL cholesterol is causative for heart disease. We know it will penetrate the endothelial wall. We know that if you give it to animals in high doses, they develop atherosclerosis. And we have human Mendelian randomization trials, which I don't want to get into, but basically they randomize people based on genetic variation. So you can randomize people into people who secrete more or less LDL based on their genetics and look at them over the course of their life. And there is a linear effect of the amount of LDL you secrete versus your rates of heart disease. I don't know how much more evidence we need to show that LDL is a causative factor. Now you can find like random control trials where they had people sub in, polyunsaturated fats for saturated fats, and they dropped LDL, but they didn't see a difference in heart disease. But if you look at these studies, they're almost always just 1 to 2 years. Well, like if you take people at age 40 or 50 and you look at how many of them have a heart attack over a couple years, you might not see any differences, but heart disease is not something that develops in 1 to 2 years. This is a lifetime exposure problem, right? It's not the difference between you dying at age 70 and age 30. It's the difference between you dying at age 75 and age 71, right? And maybe having a higher quality of life. So anyway, I realized that was a long diatribe, so I apologize for that. But just, I feel like I see a lot of comments on social media now about, saturated fats have been unfairly demonized and they're not bad for you and whatnot. And again, you can find people, because you can always find something. You can find people who have high LDL cholesterol who live to a ripe old age. That means absolutely nothing. You can also find some people who smoked every single day of their lives and never got lung cancer. That doesn't mean that smoking isn't bad for you. So again, if you're going to use saturated fat, use it in moderation and balance it out with having some of these other fats. You know, if we're talking about oils, canola, olive, even though it's a monounsaturated, seems to be particularly good for you. Try to balance it out. And then honestly, just not eating too much overall goes a long way as well.
And absolutely, talk about coconut oil a while back. It was like religion or politics. I had some debates and people just, they were not impressed when I said, hey, coconut oil is not great. People are actually making healthy recipes. Oh, it's healthy brownies. I took out the fat I usually put in and I put coconut oil. I'm like, okay. And so we went back and forth. And as far as coconut oil, it's great for your skin. Rub it on your skin. It's a great moisturizer. Use that for moisturizing. So maybe don't eat so much of it, but definitely rub it on your skin. As far as the spray, cooking sprays, I don't cook with oil ever. Literally never. I don't do it. At this point, I'm like, why am I going to waste 120 calories in a tablespoon, which is a large percentage of my, on oil when I can go, and 10 calories per second is what I tell people. All these things are rounding down under 5 calories. They basically say 0. I think it says a quarter second spray. Yeah. 10 calories per second, spray 3 seconds, 30 calories. It's not nearly enough to make a big difference. I spray it on my popcorn and I put on my little salt Veganer, my Sugar Twins, or my cheddar chives or whatever on my popcorn. I add in my 30, 40 calories and I make it taste delicious. So, for me, that's important. And changing the subject, vitamins A, D, E, and K, fat-soluble vitamins. Is there a certain amount of grams we need in a day? And do we need to worry about getting in those vitamins? Like, are we going to is our nails not going to grow if we don't eat a certain amount of fat? Like, people are going to watch this video and they're going to walk away and I want them to know, okay, I need to eat this many grams of fat. And if I have those healthy sources that they listed, I'm probably good. Is there a minimal to absorb these vitamins so that people are going to rate a comment, but you didn't talk about the vitamins A. You know how they're going to get. Yeah. Is there a certain amount of grams of fat we need for that in particular to absorb and be just a healthy human being?
I'll be honest, this isn't my area of expertise. However, I would tell you that I have not seen any literature that really covers that. They're, again, fat soluble. So if you're eating even probably the minimal amounts of fat that we talked about, you're probably having more than enough to absorb those vitamins. And I mean, to be quite honest, mankind would not have survived as long as we have if you could simply, not absorbing all of a vitamin is different than not absorbing any of it, right? So for example, you've got people who have this impression that if you have your vitamins with a low fat meal, that's just going to pass right through you. That's not how it works. Those vitamins themselves, because they are waxes or sterols or fats or whatnot, they are going to form their own micelles as well and can still be absorbed. Now, they may not get absorbed as much, but you're still going to get quite a bit of it. So I would say that, again, if you're not just frank deficient in fats, and honestly, some of the only people I've seen be frank deficient in fats, Greg, are people, again, getting ready for contest or anorexics. I mean, it's very difficult to be frank deficient in fat, especially in this society where added fats are the major source of calories in the diet. People think it's sugar, but it's actually not. It's added fats. So I think for most people, honestly, you don't have to worry about it that much. The only people I would kind of worry about, this is what I call majoring in the minors, right? The only people I think that really need to worry about that, and again, if you're anorexic, which if you are, you've got bigger problems, and people getting ready for a show. But again, if you're taking these vitamins, if you're taking a multivitamin, and I just want to say, if you're worried, take a multivitamin, because you're going to get that plus everything you're getting in your diet. And as far as how much, I mean, I think the RDAs are perfectly fine. The only thing the RDA might be a little bit short on, in my opinion, is something like vitamin D, especially for you guys up there in Canada. But even so, there's some evidence that suggests that like even taking supplemental vitamin D may not make as big of an impact on our blood vitamin D levels as we think. But I would say, maybe 2,000 IUs of vitamin D per day, something like that. Don't overdo it because vitamin D has one of the lowest thresholds for toxicity of any of the vitamins. So don't go crazy with it. Same thing goes for vitamin A. If anybody's ever taken Accutane for acne, because I did when I was a kid, that's basically high dose retinol. And man, you want to talk about some side effects, like horrible, like joint pain, dry skin, my lips would crack and bleed. So, the RDAs are fine for those. Keep in mind that vitamins, a lot of them during the process of usage, they're what's called coenzymes. So they sit in the active site of enzymes in your body and facilitate some of these chemical reactions. Well, most coenzymes actually get reused. They're not used up by those reactions. That's why you don't need a ton of vitamins in order to get optimal function. And, most people think that vitamins are like macros, right? Like if you're more active, then that means you need more vitamins. No, you actually don't. Again, the only caveat to that may be something like vitamin D. If you're a female, you might need a little bit more iron because you do have blood loss every month, unless you don't have a period. And maybe even something like calcium. There might be some benefits to some additional calcium. But other than that, don't overdo it with the vitamins. Take a golden multivitamin that gets you near your RDA, and you really don't have to worry about it very much.
And would you say the water-soluble vitamins in general, pretty safe even if you take too much, as opposed to these fat-soluble vitamins, and they're the ones that you kind of don't want to be overboard on?
Yeah, correct. I mean, just look, every supplement seemingly has B vitamins in it, just because it's cheap and they just throw it in there to look fancy. That's why people are like, where are the B vitamins in your supplements? I'm like, you're getting them in the other ones you take. Everything has B vitamins. If you have an energy drink at a gas station, it's got B vitamins in it. So, and you're right. You don't have to really worry about overdosing on those. The LD50s on water-soluble vitamins is extremely, extremely high because you can excrete them in your urine and get rid of them. But that also means why overdose them? Because you're just wasting your money.
Exactly.
Right? That's the other way to look at it.
And so in general, if you're eating, so just to wrap it up, if you're eating from the 4 food groups and you're not starving yourself, you're not trying to have 5% body fat, you're not anorexic, in general, everyone is going to have enough fat in their diet so long as they're not actively trying to avoid all sources of fat.
Yeah. I mean, I think this brings up a great point of a larger discussion as I was listening to you describe that, Greg. It's that this is why I'm just a big fan of kind of balanced diets overall. Whenever I hear people trying to hack together methodologies to get certain nutrients on a diet, I kind of have to ask them, and you think that this is healthy? You think that this is a good idea that, you're eating this diet and now you have to take all these supplements and you've got to do all these food combinations to get it. Obviously, no hate towards vegans because I do understand that some people have an ethical argument that they make, and it's not for me to decide what other people's ethics are. But if you're doing it because you think it's the most healthy thing you can do, you're kidding yourself. If you're doing a carnivore diet because you think that's optimal for human health, you're kidding yourself. And probably even low carb diets or super low fat diets, because again, you're going to have to supplement, or you're going to have to do some really weird food combinations to get what you want. So, I mean, for the most part, this stuff comes down to eat a level of calories that are conducive towards your goal, eat enough protein, and carbs and fats for the most part, unless you're eating a really restrictive diet, you're not going to have really, really low fats or really, really low carbs. If you're eating a diverse array of foods, you're going to get enough of both. And to eat a very low fat diet that would cause a frank deficiency if you're eating a reasonable amount of calories would be such a strange diet. It'd basically be rice, cereals, and candy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
it would be a really strange diet. So keep that in mind. Like, I think a lot of people hear about what happens on low fat diets and they don't realize that, again, they're talking about low calorie diets and they worry that that's going to happen to them. No, bro, you're eating 3,000 calories a day. More than likely, you're just fine.
Yeah, so please don't confuse low fat with low calories. And if you're eating all 4 food groups and you're not cutting out anything in particular, the chances of you being deficient or not optimal even, probably hard. But if you're trying to take out a certain food group, you're starting a new fad diet, whether it's avoiding all carbs, avoiding all fats, or if you're vegan, it's not that you can't be healthy by following these diets, it's that it becomes more difficult. If you're cutting out your fishes, well, now you have to substitute for something else. If you're not eating this or that, you have to be aware of the nutrients that you might not be getting and make those substitutions.
Absolutely. And I think, again, like, I think it's good to go through the nuances of this stuff, but, most people who are listening to this isn't the information they really need to hear is the stuff that's really boring and they've heard 100 times. They just haven't ingrained it, which is, I tell people you can get 95% of the health benefits that are out there by doing like 5 or 6 things. And that's don't eat like an asshole. Don't smoke, limit alcohol, sleep enough, exercise, limit your stress. Not necessarily in that order. But if you do those 6 things, you're going to be doing a lot better than most people.
Yeah, absolutely. It really isn't that hard. If you really think about it, if you just commit yourself a little bit to doing a little bit of each thing, you're probably going to get more benefits than most people. And it's not about being perfect. It's about doing the best that you can.
100% agree.
All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the interview. I highly suggest you go and subscribe to Dr. Layne Norton channel, Instagram, YouTube. Do you want to maybe just say what that is?
Yeah, so you can find me on most of my social media is just BioLayne, so youtube.com/BioLayne. If you search me on Instagram, BioLayne, and then my website's biolayne.com. And then the app I mentioned earlier is Carbon Diet Coach, and you can find that on iOS and Android.
Perfect. And until next time, we are out.